in the studios with me is former Lieutenant. If I talk about a retired military officer, do you say former Lieutenant Colonel, or do you say Lieutenant Colonel retired, or how do you do it? What's the right way?
Retired Lieutenant Colonel. That means the individual served 20 years or more active duty, and it's great to be here. Thank you, Barry.
From the United States Air Force, by the way.
Yes.
And you were a pilot in the Air Force and all. This is Wendy Rogers, ladies and gentlemen. This is the person who should get elected in Congressional District 9 and clean that thing up and get this do-nothing Congresswoman, Kristen Sinema, out. I'm just wondering, 2 years ago, were you surprised that she got it? It was a very close race.
It was a close race. Well, we had 7 Republicans in the primary because it was the brand new seat. Mm-hmm. And if you recall, I came in a very close second by 700 votes behind Vernon Parker, and of course got our team out the next day to help him win this seat. Democrats, of course, only had 3 in that primary, and Kirsten Sinema won, and then, of course, went on to win the general election.
And after that, she promptly disappeared. I don't know where she is. I know she comes out every once in a while, and she first did a campaign commercial spotlighting some poor guy in the military. Excuse me, I'm getting choked up here. Spotlighting some guy, came out of the military. I think he'd been in Afghanistan, if I'm not mistaken. He came back suffering with the very real post-traumatic stress syndrome. She was talking about how terrible the Veterans Administration is. We know it's riddled with problems. And she was trying to tell her audience that she was taking the lead in this VA thing. Don't even forget John McCain over here. He's done nothing. But she was taking the lead in this VA thing. And she was talking about how she's going to get in there and clean it up. And then the news came out that this guy was not a patient of the Veterans Administration. He had been under a private physician's care for 5 years. And sadly, he took his own life, but the VA had nothing to do with it. So quick as a flash, we had to change our commercials. And now we're doing commercials that basically say it doesn't matter if you're Republican or Democrat, nobody has the answer, so you might as well put me back in there. Only problem is it does matter because she's an Obamacare person. She's, 100% on the president's policies and all of that. But now let me ask you about your commercial. What happened with your commercial over the last week?
Our commercial is a very aggressive rundown of what her votes have been here in terms of not supporting national security. Kirsten Sinema's voting record shows that she wants Guantánamo Bay detainees to be sent home. And
she wants to close it up and send them back?
Right, and put them back in the fight, essentially. And also, even more troubling, to try terrorists on U.S. soil and treat them as criminals rather than the combatants that they are.
Did that actually come up to a vote? Is she on the record with a vote, or it actually...
Yes,
oh, okay.
And in my ad, we have those 2 citations from roll call.
Well, everybody who knows anything about this knows that we put them down there so we can deal with them. First of all, don't bring them on the U.S. homeland for a lot of different reasons. We've already seen what happens when you try a terrorist in a U.S. courtroom. They intimidate the juries. They intimidate the audience in the courtroom. At any moment, you think they've got, and they probably do, henchmen who are, just glaring at people. They don't say anything, but they make the juries feel, ill at ease. I don't know if you can get a fair trial out of this. This is what she voted to do, to bring them in here and try them.
And that's correct. And people need to understand that terrorism is theater. And theater now that can go viral in an instant with social media. So to try a terrorist on U.S. soil gives the terrorist, the combatant, everything he wants. He has a stage that way.
You used, in your ad, a still picture of one of these ISIS guys who was going to behead, well, I think it was the American, and her people went nuts. How could you do that? And I thought to myself, well, this is reality. I mean, this is really what happened. And, this is a very real threat because ISIS is now telling Islamic people anywhere in America, just isolate an American anywhere on the street and go kill them. Now we've got a real threat that they're going to go break into a daycare center or a school and behead a child. Somewhat, a lone wolf terrorist. So they were going nuts about your ad when they said, oh, it's terrible that you would exploit this. Meanwhile, they exploited a dead veteran who died from PTSD. I mean, there seems to be no end to what these people do.
Well, it touched a nerve. And this is what Rush Limbaugh emphasized yesterday. This touched a nerve. My ad has been the shot that has run around the world now from here to Singapore because we're on Yahoo in Singapore because they can't argue against it. They can't argue. The left cannot answer the mail on the lack of national security that has been woefully apparent now. And Kyrsten Sinema has been the cheerleader for President Obama in this aspect. And so it scares them to death that someone is running against Kyrsten Sinema, who's not only a veteran, who's a fifth-generation career military veteran, who's a mother, who's a grandmother, who started out herself, I did, as a social worker in mental health in the military, who meets a payroll, and who flew airplanes, and oh, by the way, is a woman. She just cannot assail those credentials.
So much for the war on women.
Right.
This is another thing. She was big on that for a while. I got to take that back. She hasn't been big on anything. As I said, she sort of disappeared. Every time she would talk, it was just kind of spouting off the Democrat talking points of the day. So they were doing that war on women thing, except that didn't go well. So now, Democrats running all over the country for the Senate, especially the Senate, I think it's going to go Republican. I know we're going to keep the House, but we need to keep it by a bigger margin because, you know what you're up against. If you win this election...
When I win?
When you win this election, you're going to get up there, and Obama's already stated he's with the stroke of a pen. There's going to be amnesty. There's going to be some kind of draconian global warming laws that are going to be passed to raise the cost of living for all of us. The war on coal is going to be worse than ever, and it's going to be up to the House to block this stuff.
You're so right.
The word is neutralizing.
Yes, I just had a phone conversation with Ambassador John Bolton last week, and he said, Wendy Rogers, I know everybody's concentrating on the Republicans winning the Senate, but he said, I, for one, am concentrating my donations and my wherewithal on increasing the number of House seats, because you in the House of Representatives will ultimately make the difference, because the more conservative Republicans we have who understand what national security is and how necessary it is, that is going to be the bulwark against the president.
Yeah, this is so important. It's 2 years to go. It can do a lot of damage.
Oh, I know.
In 2 years, and the only hope, as I see it, to stymie this, the only hope is a strong Senate and a strong House to, put up the roadblocks and at least slow it down until we can get to the 2016 election. Anyway, hold on for just a second. Let's pause here. This is Wendy Rogers in Congressional District 9. If you're in 9, pay careful attention. If you're not in 9, send her some money, because just... WendyRogers.org is where everyone can go. It's an expensive thing to mount one of these campaigns. Hang on a second. It's KFYI.
I want you to get up right now and go to the window, open it, and stick your head out and yell,
To ask themselves, I think the election, in 25 days, midterm elections, everybody's got to ask themselves, what are we going to do in order to stymie this Barack Obama thing? Because there's going to be some really horrible things that get signed by the president's pen, these executive actions. I hear people all the time saying, don't worry, the courts can reverse it. There's never been an executive action reversed by the courts. I don't even know if, the House and the Senate have really been, I think we stopped one, maybe two in the history of the United States. But ladies and gentlemen, if we get a Republican Senate and we get a real good majority, even more so in the House of Representatives, we're going to make some history over the next 2 years. Look, we've got a campaign going on right now against ISIS wherever they are. So I'm not really sure what kind of campaign we have, because now I'm hearing that we are bombing them. So now you're an Air Force veteran of more than 2 decades. You told me that you were flying back under President Bush and back under you were flying under H.W. Bush, right? And under President Clinton, and you said that you could see, and other people around you in the Air Force could feel a difference based on the commander-in-chief.
Absolutely. I flew for a number of years under President Clinton and George H.W. Bush. In the latter part of my career, I was under President Clinton. And as an example, my last mission was into Kiev, Ukraine, in a C-21 Learjet. And we had asked for diplomatic clearance to get in and out of Kiev, I think, 3 weeks prior to my mission, which was in the spring of '96. We went out to go fly back to Ramstein Air Base from Kiev. It was early spring, and there was a lot of frost on our wings. We called for a de-icing truck. Never sent it. Never sent it. They toyed with us. It was a clear affront to who we were. We finally had to get our plastic credit cards out of our wallet, climb up on the wing, and
scrape the wing.
And scrape the wings. And you're a pilot, you understand.
You're the captain of the plane. You're out there scraping the wings.
I made the passengers do it too. So we scraped the frost off the wings to make sure we were airworthy. And then as we were taxiing, getting ready to taxi out, engine started. The de-icing truck showed up.
Yeah. Okay. Well, there you go.
I got home and we talked about it, and they said that was a clear, diplomatic little slap in the face.
A little snub going on. Well, I mean, now it's happening to, Obama. It's open between everything that Putin is doing. I mean, shot down a jet, for God's sake, and a passenger jet. Well, we do nothing, and Obama's over there saying, if Bashir Assad crosses this red line and uses weapons of mass destruction, oh, my God, we're going to do something. And I'm still waiting. We're still waiting now. And so we got this thing going on. So let's just flash back and play what if. You had been in the military, and you see this where the commander-in-chief is merely talking about degrading the enemy. Have you ever heard of anything like that as an officer in the military? Anybody said what we got to do is go out and degrade them and teach them a lesson?
It's silliness, and what it does is it telegraphs to our enemies a lack of political will. It shows to our enemies. When we say we don't want to have boots on the ground, we should not be telling people what we don't want to do. We should be telling the enemy what we will do, and to that extent, we should not be revealing what our plans are. Our plans for exiting a country, our plans for how we're going to accomplish the mission. You do not tell the enemy what you're going to do. You do not put your forces on a timeline so that the enemy can sit and wait it out. This is the kind of demoralizing influence that our commander-in-chief has had on the military. And it's frankly very, very troubling because lives are lost when the commander-in-chief is not resolute, when his cheerleaders are not resolute, when someone like Sinema says it's okay for our commander-in-chief to lead this way. This isn't leadership. This is apologetic.
And just to make sure that there's no ambiguity here, it does matter which party you're a member of with regard to this election to the House of Representatives, right? I mean, she's out there basically saying,
absolutely,
well, it doesn't matter, we're not right, and they're not right.
That really touches a nerve with those of us in the military are politicians who use the military, are politicians who are never really a friend of veterans, of the active duty military, but then when they're running for office, they try to look as though they are, and they trot out props, and they trot out people who make them look as though they are a friend of the military. When you look at the record of a politician, it's clear where she has stood. She has never been a friend to us in the military.
Well, I mean, she wanted to close Luke Air Force Base for one thing. That was a number of years ago. And I listen, people throw this around, and I've had people say, you really shouldn't say that on the air because, we don't know for sure. But all these stories floating, and you can't get her to deny it. Was she or was she not a communist at some point in time? I don't know. I'm not even asking to get into that. These stories are just floating around all the time, and you can't, if I asked you if you're a communist, step up and say no.
I think
I can't get an answer.
A leopard never changes her spots.
Yeah.
You have to look at somebody and how she or I have conducted my life throughout my growing up years and my professional life.
Yeah.
If you want to know how a politician is going to vote and defend or not defend her country, look at the record. Look at what the record of service has been, and that will tell the tale.
You got it. All right, now, listen, those who want to go to your website, because it costs money to run this campaign, even if you're not in District 9, and, you know, you don't have, money's tight, Christmas is coming and all that, send over $5 or something and help out. This is a very important congressional race, not just to Arizona, but to the entire country. So how do they find your website?
Wendy, like the hamburgers, Rogers, like Roy Rogers, wendyrogers.org. And let me emphasize, this is now one of the top 10 races in the United States. The polls show us surging. This is a race we are now winning. Why? Because soccer moms have become security moms. And it's a suburban district where a brush fire effect is occurring because it's a densely populated district.
All right. I got to stop here because I'm already over time, but I want you to come back on before the election and come back in and give us an update and tell us how it's going. And don't stop running the commercial, because if they're screaming and yelling at you and cursing you, it hurts. It hurts them. So don't stop running the commercial.
We're doing everything right, and thank you to everybody. Yes, each $1,000 donation gets the ad up one more time.
All right, there it is. Wendy Rogers, ladies and gentlemen. Come back again. Lieutenant Colonel Wendy Rogers. Come back again. It's KFYI.